Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Roadmap Series 2 India webinar. I'm Rajiv Dasgupta on behalf of the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and the UKRI GCRF One Health Poultry Hub. We had a Roadmap Series 1, and now we're beginning this Roadmap Series 2 for India. Today's webinar is titled Beyond Blueprints, Opportunities for Implementing One Health AMR Governance in India. We have two very distinguished speakers, Dr. Jyoti Mishra, representing the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, and Professor Y.K. Gupta, former head of pharmacology at the All Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and now representing the AMR Alliance. Our moderator today is Dr. Samiran Panda, currently A. Paintal Chair at the Indian Council of Medical Research and former Additional Director General at the ICMR. Welcome to the speakers and the moderator, and welcome to all our attendees. We are quite overwhelmed by the enthusiastic registration, and I'm sure many more would be joining shortly. A couple of announcements. There will be the polls on your screen. So as and when the polls appear, there will be a total of 3 polls. Please vote, and then your screen will be cleared. Second, there will be 2 talks, and then followed by the question-answer discussion session. We would request you to put your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. So not only do we look forward to two very exciting presentations, but also a very vibrant discussion that should add to the discourse. Thank you. I welcome Professor Fiona Tomley. She is the Project Director of the One Health Poultry Hub. Over to Professor Fiona Tomley.
Thank you very much, Professor Dasgupta, and thank you for asking me to say a few words at the start. It's a great pleasure to be here. Can you put my slide up, please, Pallavi? Thank you. So I'm the principal investigator for this One Health Poultry Hub, and on your slide, what you have here is a collection of 12 projects. These are 12 hubs which were funded by Global Interdisciplinary Research Fund from 2019 to 2024. And you'll see that they cover a very wide range of quite important problems. Is everything from action against stunting to trade to nitrogen to water to oceans. And we are at the top, the One Health Poultry Hub. Next, move on, please. Next slide, thank you. So collectively, these hubs are partnered with a very large number of organizations around the world, and you'll see that there's a preponderance in South Asia and in Europe, but actually the hubs are reaching out to partners in institutes all around the world. Next slide, please. Within the One Health Poultry Hub, we have a very wide range of partners, 27 institutions, and we're focusing all of our field and laboratory studies in South and Southeast Asia, in India, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, and also in Vietnam. And we're an interdisciplinary research and impact network. And what we're aiming to do is to understand systems of poultry production with our partners throughout these countries and look at ways in which we can work together to develop safer and more sustainable production systems. And virtually all of the work is done in Asia rather than in the UK. Next slide, please. I think we all know why we're looking at poultry. If you look at the graph on the left, the blue shows how poultry production has increased since the 1960s, and it's taken over now as being the most popular protein source for animal protein source for human consumption. Meat and eggs together are incredibly important, particularly in this region. And if we move on to the next slide, the reason why we're working in Asia is because the predicted rise is going to, oh, sorry, can you go back a little bit? That's it. The rise in production is not over yet. We're expecting that it's going to go up by a significant amount more before 2050. And a very large proportion of that increase will continue to be occurring in Asia. About 70% of the future growth is likely to be in Asia. Can you move on a bit? Thank you. But we know that systems of production are complicated. They come with a lot of problems that can affect the environment, can infect communities, and certainly can have an impact on zoonotic disease and antimicrobial resistance. And they're complex systems. Often antimicrobial use is poorly regulated, and many farms are operating with low levels of biosecurity and hygiene. Also, there's a preponderance in Asia for a preference for live birds rather than frozen birds. And there's a lot of complicating factors and consumer behaviors, which make it a very interesting and very challenging issue to look at. Next slide, please. So within our hub, we've identified 3 areas that we're particularly focusing on as markers of how to look at sustainability. Avian influenza needs no introduction. It's ripping through many parts of the world, mostly at the moment Europe and North America, but it's been identified all over the world, and it's causing major problems and can, under some circumstances, be zoonotic. But we're also focusing on bacterial foodborne infections and antimicrobial resistance. And it's on that latter topic that the webinar is going to be focusing today. So I think that might be my last slide. Thank you very much for the chance just to introduce the hub, and I hope you have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fiona Tomley. We welcome Professor Robin Alders to give an overview of this roadmap series.
Thanks so much, Professor Rajib. It's a real pleasure to play a small part of this important webinar. I'm Robin Alders, a Senior Consulting Fellow within the Chatham House Global Health Program, which is part of the One Health Poultry Hub family. The first roadmap series was conceived and organised by an interdisciplinary team from Chatham House, the Royal Veterinary College, the Institute of Development Studies, and City University of Hong Kong. We titled it Discussions for the Future of Poultry, People and Planet. And we did that because we recognise that getting food and food systems right is vital to sustainable development. And given the prominent role of the poultry industry in global food security, we felt it essential that poultry researchers, producers and industry actively engage in a public debate regarding food system transformation. Topics for each of the 18 live events were linked to 5 guiding themes, and they're highlighted in the blue circles on the left-hand side of this slide. These 5 themes were poultry production and distribution systems, food systems, disease and pandemics, disease risk governance, and food systems governance. Each of the roadmap presenters shared 3 key messages, and at the conclusion of their presentation, and they gave these 3 key messages at the end of their presentations. And when we analysed these messages, what we found that there were 9 themes that emerged, and these 9 themes are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. As you can see, the importance of One Health governance and implementation was found to be a central outcome, with the remaining themes being that local perspectives and priorities are key. Cultural aspects of poultry production remain of significant importance. And also that equity and justice are part of sustainable and safe food and poultry production systems. The presenters also identified the need to deliver interdisciplinary and intersectoral action for risk management and animal welfare, the need for effective science and science communication that underpin most of our One Health work, and the need for robust and relevant data sets, and the need to achieve nature-based or agroecological food systems. And finally, and related to this webinar, the need for interdisciplinary and intersectoral approaches to antimicrobial stewardship. The first roadmap series started in October 2020 and finished in August 2021 with a workshop in each hub country where the outcomes above were discussed and national priorities for further discussions were identified. Today's webinar is a result of those discussions, and I very much look forward to listening to the eminent presenters who have kindly agreed to present today and to the discussion that their talks are going to generate. Thank you very much, and back to you, Professor Rajiv.
Thank you, Professor Robin Alders. It's a pleasure to introduce our moderator this afternoon, Dr. Samiran Panda. Dr. Panda is a well-known name, a well-known face, particularly in the backdrop of his sterling role in the COVID management in India. To introduce Dr. Panda formally, he is a tropical medicine specialist and an astute clinician researcher known for his contributions in the field of public health. Currently, he holds the position of Dr. A.S. Paintal Distinguished Scientist Chair at the Indian Council of Medical Research. As the former Additional Director General of the ICMR headquarters and the Director of the ICMR National AIDS Research Institute, he led research responses to the COVID-19 and HIV pandemics in India. We are very fortunate in having Dr. Panda as the moderator today. I hand over the proceedings to Dr. Panda. And once again, thanks very much to our two speakers also, and above all, the audience. Over to Dr. Panda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rajiv Dasgupta, for your kind words. And it's indeed a pleasure for me getting invited to moderate the sessions, which we are going to listen to two distinguished speakers. And this is, as you are all aware, One Health Poultry Hub Roadmap Series 2, the India webinar. The next one will happen sometime in January next year. In this particular webinar, we are aiming to increase our understanding around the governance of AMR in India and at the national and at the state levels. Sharing of the practical experiences and the challenges in multisectoral collaboration and adopting interdisciplinarity, which is at the core of the governance of AMR, as well as the One Health discourses, is another aim of ours that we wish to achieve through this webinar. And we'll try explore the opportunities of integrating AMR in the existing health governance structure that is there in the country, in India, and identifying implementation challenges related to the National Action Plan-I and agenda setting for the National Action Plan-II related to AMR, as well as understanding the needs and the concerns of different stakeholders with regard to AMR in India would be our another aim. So I would first introduce the first speaker of today's webinar, Dr. Jyoti Mistry, and it's my privilege to be able to do so. Dr. Mistry is currently the principal scientist, animal health, at the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, and with over 30 years of experience in research and teaching, she addresses areas and her areas of interest and expertise are animal disease diagnosis, epidemiology, vaccine development, disease pathogenesis, post-pathogen interaction, and detailed pathology of various animal diseases, as well as development of suitable control measures for their control or containment. She has developed primary survey instrument to study the impact of avian influenza under ICMR, DHD, ICAR collaboration. Dr. Mistry is the author of about 100 research publications in various national and international peer-reviewed journals, and articles are published. 8 books go to her credit, where she has contributed book chapters. Also, Dr. Mistry is coordinating about 17 research programs at the national level in important livestock and poultry disease-related issues. Dr. Mistry, the podium is yours.
At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers from JNU, Dr. Rajiv Das Gupta, and UK partners for initiating this wonderful seminar on One Health Poultry Hub Roadmap series. And friends, as we all know that AMR is considered as one of the biggest threats to modern civilization, which can jeopardize global health, economy, and human development. Antimicrobial resistance has the enviable position for being one of the leading infectious causes of mortality in humans. The issue was discussed in United Nations General Assembly in New York in September 2016, and AMR is the fourth health-related issues to be discussed at General Assembly, besides HIV, non-communicable diseases, and Ebola. The impact of AMR is not limited to health sector as generally presumed, but has far-reaching consequences to cause irreversible damage to global economy and food security. The famous report by Professor O'Neill 2016 was an eye-opener. Subsequently, WHO came with the Global Action Plan, and subsequently, India also came up with the National Action Plan in 2017, taking cognizance of the importance given to this important antimicrobial resistance in general, and especially its role in the animal sector, because food animals are being used for the public consumption. And we know that I'll be speaking and confining my presentation to especially in the animal sector, and including the aspects from our activities which have been carried out in the network program which we are collaborating. We know that Indian meat sector is growing very exponentially, and we have seen that production and growth rate needs to be corroborated. And besides the rice, the next commodity which is being in demand is the buffalo meat. And if we see species-wise meat contribution, we see that around poultry meat production is around 50%, which is contributing to the food sector in the from the animal sector. Next, please. And here you can see how much contribution of the species-wise meat contribution. This is as per the studies which have been taken into cognizance by the DHT Department of Animal Husbandry 2020. Next, please. And as such, antimicrobial usage in chicken or cattle and pigs, as per the references which were available, it accounts for about 93.75% of all the food animals, and expected global microbial sale is 93,309 tons. Expected global microbial sales in 2030 is expected to show an exponential increase of 11.5%. Similarly, if we corroborate that antimicrobial usage in pigs, cattle, and chickens, it amounts to 45%, 22% and 33% respectively. And as per the information available, Asia consumes the largest amount of antimicrobials. So we need to work on the antimicrobial usage pattern in the Indian scenario, and we require the collaboration not only from the Animal Sciences Institutes or from ICR, but all the partners, commercial units and commercial hubs to develop a suitable protocol and work in this direction, so that we have relevant information about the usage of the antimicrobials in the food producing animals. Next, please. There are some of the references pertaining to the antimicrobial pathogens which have been studied in the Indian scenario. And if we see that in the mastitis, the resistance mechanism could be referred as horizontal transmission. Similarly, for the bovine mastitis, it was the resistance among the bovine mastitis pathogens. in poultry fecal sample, that is the indiscriminate antibiotic use. There have been several initiatives which have been carried out by the government of India and other institutions for mitigating the causes of the antimicrobial resistance and carrying out some of the decisions which could ban the use of the antimicrobials as the antibiotic growth promoters, which were used as the prophylactic. Next, please. Now, the major animal diseases which causes loss in the productivity and also economic losses to the livestock sector are, these are FMD, IBR, PPR, and in the poultry sector, Ranikhet, fowl-pox, infectious bursal diseases, avian influenza, even Fiona was referring to it. And these are some of the major diseases which we are carrying out the economic impact studies also. And some of the, for example, we have carried out some partnering studies with other institutions where we have seen that its annual about loss is 20,000 crores for FMD and similarly for PPR around 8,900 crores. So there is an urgent need to have a strategic national framework for their eradication, which otherwise has direct impact on the antimicrobial use and development of AMR. But one thing I want to specify that the disease control programs, which are coordinated by the Government of India and technical support being provided by the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, antimicrobial resistance is unlike those programs because it requires direction right from top to the bottom, and it is sustenance working for, be it for surveillance, be it for diagnostic development, or be it for vaccines or accredited labs, infrastructure development facilities in the various labs. So everything is to be required, and this antimicrobial resistance is unlike other disease control programs. Next, please. So these are the 5 ways antibiotic resistance could disrupt the sustainable development goals. AMR could push an additional 24 million people into extreme poverty, and under high AMR impact scenario, there is a possibility for 7% loss in productivity by 2030. So it also impacts the good health and well-being. And for example, antibiotic resistance puts patients being treated for cancer or ulcers to the life-threatening infections. And it has an impact on the global GDP. And it could be as large as 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And it also brings reduced inequality. AMR could further widen the economic inequality between the countries. Next, please. And I corroborated with this William Shakespeare say, some organisms may be born resistant, some achieve resistance by mutation, or some have resistance thrust upon them by plasmids. Next, please. So because keeping the time constraint into consideration, I will simply move fast with the slides, and wherever required, we can have discussion. So I will just go with this brief mechanism about the antibiotic resistance. Natural, acquired, and natural is intrinsic, acquired by the genetic method, and where natural is where it lacks, for example, targets, there is no cell wall, or the innate efflux pump is there, or there is drug inactivation. And similarly for acquired, it refers to the changes in the DNA structure. For example, we see in the mycobacterium and in case of the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. And we have then chromosomal methods also, and extra chromosomal methods where there is transfer of resistant genes. They go from one bacterium to another through conjugation, transduction, and transformation, and also transfer of resistant genes between plasmids within the bacterium by transposons and integrons. Next, please. So I would now go with the activities which we have carried out under Indian Network for Fishery and Animals Antimicrobial Resistance. So keeping the importance given to this antimicrobial resistance, Indian Council of Agriculture Research with facilitation from FAO, they come up with a network program. The objective was to generation of nationwide structured quality data through surveillance and research on AMR specific to livestock and fisheries sectors for strengthening knowledge and better understanding of AMR. One thing I want to emphasize that in the human sector, they have started the network program way back in 2009, but a lot of information was lacking pertaining to the transmission dynamics of the AMR pathogens from animals to humans or vice versa, through linkages to environment and through other sources, through direct or indirect routes. So, INFAR is a national network of laboratories, livestock and fisheries, conceptualized to strengthen surveillance of antimicrobial resistance in India. So we have around veterinary institution about 12 and fisheries about 9. Then we have state agriculture veterinary colleges also, and we have also involved the RDDL, disease diagnostic labs of the state government also. So presently we have around 35 centers which will be working for this program. Next, please. So what activities we have carried out? We have applied this national network of veterinary labs at Kolkata, 7 to 8, 2017, and then subsequently we held many meetings for prioritizing and identifying research priorities in the veterinary sector, and this meeting was held at 2017. Subsequently, meeting to finalize the research priorities on AMR in animal health was implemented in Bangalore in July 2017, and FAO meeting and operation how to go in for this network program in the 2017, and this establishment was subsequently we came up with this INFAR. Next, please. What we have carried out, we have gone in with the standard operating procedures and for antibiotic susceptibility test, phenotypic and genetic in genotypic in animal and fishery sector. We are having the standardized SOPs in the fishery sector also and in the veterinary sector also. And subsequently, besides standard operating procedures for both the fisheries and the animal sector, we also have standardized sampling framework which is being taken into cognizance in this network. Next, please. So these are the names of our institution: IVRI, NDI, Nivedi, CARI, and these are all animal sciences institutes, and these are the fishery institutions. Because we have been working in silos, and the main aim of this network program was to bring all the information for tabulation, evaluation, and go in with for the policy decisions, so that we are able to mitigate the antimicrobial resistance. And we also have collaborations from these universities. We have incorporated the CAU Aizawl, then this Datiwada, then Rajuwat, and Patna, Coast, and Mapsu, and Kerala University also. We have a very advisory board which is constituted by the Secretary ICR to guide the INFAR and review and give technical and expert guidance. So far, we are had about I think a regular annual review meeting and collection of samples from terrestrial and aquatic animals, isolation of the target bacteria. For the animal sciences sector, we have selected 2 pathogens, that is E. coli and Staph aureus, and then we are reporting the results as per the PUNET 5.6, and subsequently we are having the trainings also being regularly and organized for tabulation and evaluation of the data, and the data tabulation is uniform for all the centers. And data on AMR in animal sector is being continuously generated and reviewed, but I think the pandemic hit us also, and there were some interruptions in the data collection also. Next, please. And these are, we are collecting rectal swabs for pig, sheep, and goats, and cloacal swabs for poultry. And in the milk for cattle, buffalo, we are getting milk samples and pig nasal swabs, and estimated prevalence of ESBL, E. coli, and MRSA as 13% and 5% respectively. And what is being projected for the animal sciences sector? So far, we could not get very high figures for MRSA or ESBL. So 248 samples are collected by each center, and including 132 milk samples, which will be processed in the 4 phases during the year. Then rectal swabs, I have already said, and milk and nasal swabs, they will be screened for Staph aureus and pons. And subsequently, next phase will include screen scrapping, tracheal swab, pus and blood. And targeted pathogens so far are E. coli and Staph aureus. And for the fisheries sector, we have besides them Aeromonas and Vibrio cholera. And then subsequently, we'll also target Klebsiella, Salmonella, Pseudomonas, Enterococcus, and Campylobacter. Next, please. Next, please. These are the capacity building programs which we have carried out on the laboratory-based surveillance of AMR, human health, and veterinary sector. So these are the list of all the training. Next, please. So this is glance into the data. So based on so many of the E. coli isolates of avian, it's this much, bovine, and this much, we could find out that high resistance was noted in the amikacin and then and nalidixic acid. So they were relatively sensitive to chloramphenicol resistance. So these are, next please, because I have a limitation of time. Next. So these are the resistance to most of the antibiotics except chloramphenicol was most frequent among avian and porcine isolates. Next, please. So we could find out that among the E. coli isolates, higher resistance was to cefotaxime and ceftriaxone and ampicillin and amikacin. Next, please. So I'll move with the slides very fast. Whatever has to be, I will go in the lead slide. Next, please. So resistance to all antibiotics was much higher in MC, beta-lactamase producer, than in the non-producer. Next, please. And in one point, I want to specify that we could also find out the avipenum resistance, which even though avipenum is not being used in the animal sector. So there are some researchable issues also. Maybe environment samples are required to be taken in for surveillance. So based on these much staphylococci, and we could find that high resistance noted to penicillin, and about 20% of these isolates are limbolid resistant. Next, please. So high resistance to all antibiotics noted among porcine and then among the bovine isolates. So we could find out the resistance pattern that next, please, that avian and porcine, they were having more AMR. In addition to penicillin resistant, enrofloxacin and gentamicin and atropine was much higher, and we could also find met resistant staph of food animal origin appear to carry additional resistance states for fluoroquinolone and erythromycin. So next, please. So these are the leads. E. coli isolates from food animals exhibited high resistance to amikacin, ampicillin, and then cefotaxime and nalidixic acid. However, they were sensitive to chloramphenicol. And high resistance among avian E. coli isolates were noted for all the antibiotics, leading to overall high resistance to 4 antibiotics stated above. And we find that most of the staph isolates were penicillin resistant. However, among the MRSA and MR cons isolates, resistance to enrofloxacin, erythromycin, and trimethoprim and gentamicin was observed. Next, please. What we could find out from the work we have carried out for the last 3 years, that there is paucity of the scientific data in India on the extent of AMR in the livestock sector. However, INFAR has been generating AMR data in terrestrial and aquatic animals over the last 3 years. So there is also gap for the prevalence of the genes conferring resistance to antimicrobial. So we need to have data regarding that also, and knowledge gaps in epidemiology of antimicrobial resistance and human-animal interface. Next, please. So what could be action points? So we need to emphasize for the state action plan for containment of AMR sector, as has been done in the state of the Kerala with the PPP minutes. So I'll take 2 or 3 minutes. Then infrastructure of the laboratories needs to be strengthened, and we need to develop standard operating protocols should be given to all the states, and networking of all the veterinary laboratories is very important because we want to work in the One Health approach. Next, please. So these are, we need to go in for the stewardship programs also, and we are giving the advisory and advocacy to all our institutions. Next, please. And so we are also moving in alternative strategies to fight antimicrobial resistance, like there is ban on the polystyrene and VMD also. Next, please. So what we need to do is that we need to go in for the One Health approach, and we need to have partnership with the sister agencies to accelerate progress in the other countries and improve working for the AMR, so that would could mitigate it. Next, please. So if this antimicrobial resistance is not tackled now, one person could die every 3 seconds. Next, please. So what we would emphasize that there is a need for collaboration of veterinarian research and medical professionals, policymakers, farmers, drug manufacturers, and ultimately the general public is needed to fight the challenges of AMR. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry I might have taken 1 or 2 minutes. There is much more to discuss and tell about AMR, but I just rushed through my slides because there are not much which I need to still to tell about it. Okay, thank you very much. Over to Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Mistry, for that wonderful talk. And you did not overshoot by more than a minute, so it's absolutely perfect. And as Professor Rajiv Dasgupta talked about, each speaker will sort of deliver their speech within 20 minutes. The questions that the participants wish to raise, they are supposed to type those questions in the question and answer box, not in the chat box. I'm underlining that. Before I introduce the next speaker, Dr. Y.K. Gupta, I will draw your attention of all the participants to the fact that there was a poll, and now we'll get to know about the results of them. And then there will be a second poll, and that's up there on the screen. If you can see that, Professor Dasgupta, can I request you to have that announcement, the results of the poll, and then the second poll should come up, and then I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Y.K. Gupta. Hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Panda. So the poll 1 results are on your screen, and then we will quickly run the poll 2, and then welcome Professor Gupta. Professor Y.K. Gupta, thank you very much on behalf of the One Health Poultry Hub. A very warm welcome. So the poll 1 results are on your screen, and then we'll quickly run the poll 2, and then we welcome Professor Gupta. Thank you very much. And over to Dr. Panda. And once again, a very warm welcome, Professor Y.K. Gupta.
Thank you, Professor Rajiv Dasgupta. Now it's my great privilege to introduce a distinguished speaker, Dr. Y.K. Gupta. Many of you are familiar with his work and experience, but formally, as a moderator, I'm more than happy to say that he's a renowned pharmacologist. He's the National Scientific Coordinator, Working Group Member, and Chairman of Signal Review Panel of PVPR. Professor Gupta has been the Director of Indian Institute of Toxicological Research in Lucknow during 2003 to 2005. His efforts in advocating rational use of drugs and visionary approach towards the silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance have been recognized internationally. He has been appointed as Principal Strategy Advisor for Global Antibiotics Research Development and Partnership, in brief known as GARD-P. He has served at AIIMS, New Delhi for over 30 years and superannuated from the ASDN, he has been contributing significantly to the area of medicine safety, clinical research, drug regulation, and Professor Gupta's contribution in national programs like PVPI, GLP, NPIC, clinical trials, antimicrobial resistance, medical education, etc., has enhanced the standards of healthcare in multiple ways. Professor Gupta, the podium is all yours.
Thank you very much, and I am extremely thankful to my friends, Dr. Rajiv Das Gupta ji, and also to Dr. Samirin Panda for giving such a wonderful introduction. And I am extremely thankful to UKRI GCRF One Health Poultry Hub for giving me this opportunity on antimicrobial resistance. I have titled my talk as Antimicrobial Resistance and Hidden Pandemic that Needs Preparedness in Health. And Dr. Mistry has given a larger perspective of animals or poultry. I will be primarily focusing my talk on the human health. And may I request the next slide? See, where do we use antibiotics? If you just see the data of using antibiotics in livestock is almost 2/3 of the pie. And as compared to crops, agriculture, and human, which is nearly 20% or slightly lesser than that. But this data is of USA. The important thing is in India, we do not have any such data whatsoever. And that is what the first important is information when you talk of One Health is to map the country as far as the use pattern of the antibiotic is concerned. Human, animals, agriculture, whether you talk of crop, whether you culture of aquaculture is, and also when you talk of human community in hospitals, they're so interlinked today that unless we have a fairly well mapping of this, it will be very difficult to look for the effective intervention. Next. This is what we say globally, when you say global unnecessary use of antibiotics, if you just see the total use of antibiotics approximately is 40 million. Now 40 million people in the world, they get antibiotics, and out of which an estimated 27 million people get antibiotic where there is unnecessary. You can see that 27 are the crosses, and as compared to only 13 million people who are getting antibiotics when they need them. And that's what, and this is published in JAC in 2013, and the situation has not changed. I do not see that there is any change in that, and that is what important thing is. And next slide. And if you just see that the decline in the antibiotic discovery, this is what has been, in fact, we have been talking in a meeting today where I am just addressing in the morning. For last 20 years, if you just see the process of antibiotics, starting from sulfonamides in 1930s and now to 207, there's so much decline in antibiotics, new antibiotics, and almost stopped. And this is whatever antibiotics are being developed, most of these antibiotics are incremental innovation of the same class, but maybe slightly maybe slightly changed in the molecules. And what we can often say that the pipeline of antibiotic is almost drying, and therefore there is an urgent need to have an effective antibiotic. Next slide. This is, you just see the antimicrobial resistance pattern. If you just see the graph here, the death because of antibiotics today, if you just see the circle, inner circle, and if you can just see that this is the circle today of antimicrobial resistance, and this is because of the cancer. in next prediction, in next 10 years or next by 2050, the prediction of deaths because of antimicrobial resistance is increasing like this. And you can see the 10 million people in 2050 will die because of antimicrobial resistance. This will surpass the deaths because of cancer, the deaths because of the diabetes, or deaths because of other things. We are not saying that these are the less important diseases, but it indicates that AMR is emerging as one of the top 10 threats globally. More than 10 million lives will be in total. And India, most important as far as the India is concerned, is seen as becoming the capital of the AMR. 1/5 of the 2 million people who live in India, 1/5 are supposed to be dying with AMR. And that's why we call it as a pandemic, silent pandemic. Next. If you just see this, a diagram which I made it, this is the antibiotic resistance. It's a natural phenomena. Now here you see that this is the bunch of, on extreme left, this is a bunch of bacteria, and this is the population pre-existing with there's no resistant mutant except one resistant mutant, red, which is embedded here. But now, when you give antibiotic on that, the antibiotic which is a sensitive, these sensitive antibiotic will kill the sensitive organism which are yellow, and will not kill, but the red is multiplying. And ultimately what you see, the number of red means resistant organisms are becoming much and more. And ultimately, if you just see the extreme right, you see more number of red means resistant organism as compared to the sensitive organism. And at one stage, you will find that all are the resistance organism. And that is what the situation we are heading for. Next. Now, this is what is something very important, a changing paradigm shift. If you just see, we have been talking about antimicrobial resistance as per MIC, minimum inhibitory concentration. But if you just see, the bottom curve is the concentration of antibiotics, which is lesser than the MIC. What will happen? That none of the antibiotics, none of the sensitive organisms will die, none of the resistance organism will die, and there will be non-therapeutic or subtherapeutic. On the other hand, the middle concentration, which is today's conventional MIC, this will kill the normal sensitive organism, but will spare the resistant organism, and it paradoxically, it is increasing the resistance organism. What may be? The changing concept is that you increase the concentration so that is so high, which is a maximum tolerated dose, is a C max. So it will kill the resistant organism as well as the mutant organism. And that is what we are looking for. Antimicrobial dose selection is now being considered as a total out-of-box thinking process. A sensitive organism in vitro, a resistant organism in vitro, vis the what is called as a, instead of MIC versus mutant prevention concentration, MPC. That is what now we have to look afresh. Next. Now this is the man. Man means man and women, and AMR. It is overuse, misuse, inappropriate use, where you have to give for 7 days, you give for 3 days, where you have to give for 1.5 months, 1.5 years, you give for lesser duration, longer use of antibiotics, prolonged hospitalization, particularly, or a complex healthcare equipment. And you might have seen so many deaths in India or globally happening because of the ventilator deaths. And resistance pathogen spread easily because they are not killed by the antibiotics. And during hospitalization, if infected, prevention is poor and potential for cross-border. And that's why whether it is in India, it is happening in US, it is happening in Bengal, Nepal, or different states in India, or different neighboring countries, or in other part of the world also. So this is not the problem of a particular state, a particular country, but it is problem of the transboundary. And that's why we talk of One Health, not only One Health in terms of a human and animals and environment, but is a global problem. Next. This is a race to resistance. If you just see the penicillin, when 1941, when we thought that the penicillin has been Alexander got the Nobel Prize, the amphotericin, and then see penicillin 41, then 42 there was a resistance. Vancomycin 58, it took 30 years to get resistance. Amphotericin is perhaps one of the largest surviving. In 1959, it was developed in 2016 when the resistance. But you see, the ceftazidime and avibactam 2015, and the same year the resistance has appeared. So that is the change in the resistance pattern. You don't want to lose such a wonderful antibiotics. Next. And you can see on the basis of this, WHO has identified priority pathogens. And these priority pathogens are priority 1 pathogens, critical, and microorganism, priority 2, and priority 3, the medium. So the critical, that means Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, and Enterobacteriaceae. Now, so many deaths are occurring because of Acinetobacter, because there is a Pseudomonas and because there is no alternative drug. There is a high priority and there is a medium priority. So we are more worried about the critical, but also you have to be very cautious about those which are high priority and the medium priority. And next, please. Yeah. And India has also started working on it. And India has also identified its own priority list: critical, high priority, and medium priority. It's not much different, but this indicates that the priority of pathogens has to be made according to the antibiogram, or according to the organisms prevailing in that country or that area. And that's why it is important to make its own country. Next. Now, if you just see the consequence of delay in appropriate treatment, and this indicates that correct treatment within 1 hour of initial hypotension in case of sepsis. In sepsis, one of the important criteria is severe hypotension. And if within 1 hour the hypotension, the pathogen is started, 80% people will survive. Whereas it is estimated that 1 hour delay in the treatment, specific treatment, the survival rate reduces by 7.6%. So much is the impact of delay in specific treatment. And that is what is the important thing. Next. Now, this is again the major limitation where we have to work together is the timely detection of carbapenemase producing bacteria, because carbapenemase is one of the very, very important enzyme which is secreted by the resistant organisms, and the organisms becomes resistant. Now, if you just see, the undetected carbapenemase are independent factor of poor prognosis, and they increase the mortality to 20 to 40% due to suboptimal treatment, because we do not know that this is the bacteria, this is the pathogen which is secreting carbapenemase, and therefore carbapenem resistant, and therefore you do not give higher antibiotics. Now, it is estimated that then should we do carbapenemase estimation in all? It's very difficult because it's very expensive, time consuming, and point of care facilities are not aware. So what is suggested? In carbapenemase endemic zones, so can we identify that this is the carbapenemase endemic zone, and there the rapid detection of resistance is critical, and that should be ensured. And that is what the strategizing the diagnostic is critical. Next. Now, this is what we call as a fit for purpose diagnostics. And fit for purpose means for primary care, it may be different. For secondary care, it may be culture. For tertiary care, it may be molecular diagnostics. And it may be important that when you are doing molecular diagnostic, the clinicians or the microbiologists should also understand how to read it, how to interpret it, and how to see the MIC versus how to see the MPC, mutant prevention. And that's why we say fit for purpose diagnostics and making accurate diagnosis. When I say accurate diagnosis, easy to say that this is resistant, but in petri dish, but it's important to say this is resistance in therapy. And therefore, what is important is ideal characteristics of point of care test. The concept of TAT is now much more important than before. Time to appropriate antimicrobial treatment. In India, most of the antimicrobials are still given empirical because, and therefore, the corollary is, if you are giving most of the antibiotics empirical, you have to have antibiogram as sensitive, as effective, as accurate as possible. But it is also important to start the rational or appropriate antibiotic as early as possible. And that's called as a time to appropriate antimicrobial treatment. That's called the TAT. And the new term which is coming up now. Next. A correct diagnosis is 3/4 of the remedy. You just see bacterial infection diagnostic process, assess severity of illness, speed action will depend upon accuracy of illness. They rule out non-bacterial causes of infection, anatomical diagnosis, diagnosis of infection syndrome, and so on and so forth. This is therefore, it is important to diagnose if there is a microbial pathogens increasing because of the anatomical progress, anatomical abnormality. This has to be very carefully seen. Next. Next. Barriers to microbiological diagnosis. I think sometimes we look for this. What could be the barriers? The availability, accessibility of this technology, the funding for that. Sometimes the microbiological diagnosis is more expensive, so people avoid that. Accessibility and accepting microbiological diagnosis as a necessary step is important to educate even today that for the clinician as well as for the patient, that is good to start the therapy after microbiological diagnosis. Though they are limitation why they do not do, because these diagnostic facilities are available at a more expensive and people do not believe on the diagnosis. So it is important that you have to have a guiding for that. Next thing, we can skip that. So AMR from medical standpoints, if you just see here, holistic, integrated, intersectoral perspective antibiotic is very critical. And now you see that all this are interlinked, and this interlinked, whether it is from old age, whether it is from hospitals, or whether it is intercontinental. So antibiotic in surface water bodies, I think that is what important thing. We have a very, very limited isolated studies where we have shown that the antibiotics, particularly ciprofloxacin and all these antibiotics. But if you just see the amount of antibiotic which has been shown in this water bodies, this blue color is the maximum in India, and followed by the China and followed by USA. So we have been putting off or disposing these antibiotics, whether it's the leftover antibiotics or even the sewage from the industry plant goes to water body, giving antibodies for increasing meat production, giving antibody for NEB, and so forth. Ultimately, this is increasing the antibiotic load or antibiotic residue in the environment, and then this goes into these cycles, and therefore integrated approach is important. Next. That's why antimicrobial stewardship, you preserve whatever you have. Antibiotic means stewardship means protect something. An antibiotic is a systematic approach to optimal use of antimicrobials. Goal of antimicrobial stewardship is to improve patient outcome, reduce antimicrobial resistance, and important is reduce the cost. And this has been started by ICMR, and a couple of independent bodies have also started stewardship. But then when you are talking of stewardship, this has to be the educator, the medical physician, the pharmacist, the industry, everybody has to chip in together, the veterinary doctors and the environmentalists. Only then the antibiotic stewardship will work to effectively. Next. So this is, we'll just skip this. This is the 6 R's of antimicrobial stewardship. When you say right antimicrobial, right patient, right time, right dose, right route, and right duration, and that is the minimize harm for current and future. Next. And this is the critical balance we have to take it. Critical balance means the importance of appropriate empiric therapy, because that is going to stay empiric therapy, but identify source of infection, and particularly and this will be through narrow therapeutic treatment, increase resistance with broad spectrum antimicrobial use, because that will happen. You will use antibiotic, but then the important thing here is when we are challenged with developing of new antibiotic, that's what my organization GARD-P is trying to do, new antibiotics for AMR. But the major issue is that if new antibiotics are coming into the scenario, people use it more irrationally, then even these antibiotics will become resistant. And that will be a very bad situation. Therefore, introducing new antibiotic, perfect stewardship, and the One Health approach would only be the answer. Next. We can skip that. That is the community and stewardship. And what is at the policy level requirement is fast track approval for new antibiotics. It's important that if the antibiotic is available in any part of the globe, it should also be made fast track in India. And labeling regulations addressing proper use of antibiotics. Otherwise, if the effective antibiotic is started being used for increasing meat production or maybe for irrational use, then it will be a very disastrous situation. Partnering to promote public awareness, all, and implementing prescription audit. And we have developed a software which are trying to do that. Next. So personal level requirement, of course, we can skip that. Why I am saying that this is the personal level, policy levels. So yeah, next. Antibiotics during COVID has taught us important lesson, because everybody knows it that during COVID, azithromycin was so much used, and almost all antibiotics were in use, were increased manifold. Particularly azithromycin, doxycycline, ivermectin, moxifloxacin, quinolones, not 100% irrational, because initially there was some evidence, but there was no evidence later, but the use continued. So that's what important thing is. Next. Next. So there are several guidelines. Next. So various organization efforts are being there. Now, these are the different organizations working together. And idea, next slide, the point of message here is that we have to work as a consortium mode rather working in isolation. And that is what, whether even in the One Health, which I am co-chairing, there are 29 institutions which are looking into this. Next. So that is all about this. Secure is one of the initiative of GARD-P, which is making these antibiotics, new antibiotics, more expensive antibiotics available, accessible at an affordable cost and into low and middle income countries. And that is one of the initiative which GARDP is taking up. I think we stop it here. So thank you very much. Key messages. Okay, fine. Key messages: antimicrobial resistance. They occur when organisms evolve and a few antimicrobials are being developed. The misuse is dangerous, and then dedication of all stakeholders. And I must compliment One Health Poultry Organization for its initiative, and I will be happy to be associated and contribute whatever I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gupta. That was wonderful listening to you. Taking the advantage of being the moderator, of course, Pallavi is there. She's keeping a track of the questions that have popped up in the question and answer box. We'll go to that. But before that, we will listen to Professor Rajiv Dasgupta about the results of the poll 2. But before we go there, taking the advantage of my position as a moderator, I will raise one question to Dr. Mistry and one question to Dr. Gupta. You ponder over it. We'll come back after the announcement of the results of poll 2. The question to Dr. Mistry is there really an antimicrobial stewardship in veterinary health? And the related question, are there any estimates of deaths in the animal husbandry due to antimicrobial resistance? Those are the questions posed to Dr. Mistry. We'll come back to you to listen to your answer. And to Dr. Y.K. Gupta, yes, sir, in one of your slides, you showed the One Health connectivity and also mentioned about One Health during your concluding remarks. So how does India get to the intelligence system operating within the framework of One Health? And we know that the integrated public health laboratory has been okayed. Now, are we really seeing it working? We'll come back to your answer a little later. Hand it over to Professor Rajiv Dasgupta for poll 2.
Thank you very much. We will display the results of poll 2 quickly. Here, it's on your screen. You can take a minute watching it, and then we will move on to the question answer discussion session where both Dr. Mistry and Professor Gupta will be answering your questions. And then after the discussion session, before we close, there will be a poll 3 on what we have learned from today's webinar, and we will close at 4:30. Thank you for the poll 2 results, and over to Dr. Panda for the Q&A and discussion. Thank you very much. We are on the poll 2. So after the poll 2, we request you to take a look at poll 2, and then finally we will be in poll 3 after the Q&A and discussion.
Okay, so we don't need the presentation anymore on the screen, so that we can have just the discussions. And so, Dr. Mistry.
You got some.
Should I go, sir?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah, I think your question was that whether there have been some deaths reported due to the misuse of antimicrobials in the animals. Because we are carrying out surveillance as per our sampling frame and for the 2 pathogens. So as per my results, which I have encountered for the last 3 years, I could not really correlate it with the death. But what is being projected for the animal health sector regarding usage of the antimicrobials as prophylactic or as, because for therapeutics we definitely have to use. But yes, there has been in the poultry and the piggery sector where there is intensification of the farming, there maybe they are using, and so far the data which I have found and which I have evaluated, I could not correlate it with the death of the animals. However, there was one question regarding the knowledge gap. Knowledge gap, I'm in that the transmission of the AMR pathogens from animals to environment or environment to public health, and how it is moving, and what is its holistic combination of creating the pathogenicity in the animals or in the public health. It needs to be further evaluated, and what Dr. Gupta was emphasizing for the integrated surveillance mechanism. Yes, ICMR, and we had just done some exercise regarding the integrated surveillance, and we need to work upon that. That I would emphasize definitely. And there was one line, sir. I would emphasize that yes, there have been some measures which have been taken for the poultry industry. This BMD has been banned, and cholesterol sulfate is also banned. And then we are going in with some semi-intensive and grazing of these poultry systems, where we see that adequate distance is maintained between the birds, and some other measures like given the prebiotics, postbiotics, symbiotics, and definitely going in with the other systems like we already used to prophylactic antibiotics in the poultry birds, and Government of India has also given a notification regarding the not use the antimicrobials as prophylactic in the poultry.
Thank you.
Any
Thank you.
other question?
Thank you, Dr. Mistry, for your response. And you also responded to one of the questions which were there in the question and answer box. Thanks for that. Professor Gupta, if I may go to you to have your reflections on intelligence under the framework of One Health and integrated public health laboratory. Is it working, up and running, or some more things need to happen? Because the focus of this webinar is antimicrobial resistance around that governance. And so if you could kindly elaborate.
I appreciate, Dr. Panda, you have raised such a burning question, and that speaks your experience in ICMR. The estimate of intersectoral resistance mechanism or happening contribution from one organism to other, I'm saying man to poultry to dairy animals, is only a guess. There is no true estimate of that. And that is what in India, that is the first thing which we should do it. And because this is a continuum process, we have to break this chain. We believe that there is a lot of residual analysis is done for antibiotics in honeybees, in meat, and in lot of other processed food, processed meat, and we do not have an idea that how much is the burden of this, how much is the total exposure of this, and how much this contributes to the resistance, and if so, what are the antibiotics which are developing resistance primarily to this. And therefore there is a very much important to map through One Health project, which is a DBT is funded, 29 institutions are working together, that one of the important thrust area is antimicrobial resistance in that One Health project. And that is one very important, even globally, where there is much of the controlled poultry, controlled dairy farming is there. Even they do not have the 100% evidence, but we are at a very infancy stage. In absence of that, or in beginning of that, the importance of artificial intelligence is coming up very fast. You have an estimate of one place, and then can we, with the variability of other place, extrapolate and identify the magnitude of the bacterial resistance developing there, and which antimicrobial resistance, also predict maybe after 5 years or after 10 years or maybe after X years, what would be the pattern of resistance and to what extent. Important thing is that if we develop a new antimicrobial agents, how it will be positioned to be used. That will also be dictated by this artificial intelligence. So a couple of projects have been funded by Department of Biotechnology to IIT on artificial intelligence on antimicrobial resistance. So that is a very, very important question. And I would say much need to be done in this area.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Gupta. I can see one more question in the question and answer box there, directed towards you, which says, what is the reference of antibiotics in surface water bodies in India?
There are two, three references which I could attain. One is the study which was conducted from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and that suggested that study was done in few rivers, including Jamna River, and then other 2-3 published, and that has suggested, and then a couple of published not papers but published reports from the NGO. I have not named that NGO, but you very well know, they also publish, and they have suggested that these are the antimicrobials which are shown. But the important thing in those reports is critical, that is what point of the sampling was done, what is the sensitivity of these antimicrobial agents is done, but the important thing is that we need to have a much more studies of flowing water and stagnant water, and of course the different water bodies, whether this is a significant or this is a non-consequential. Does it contribute to the antimicrobial resistance, or this does not? Theoretically, yes. Practically, we do not know how much.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Misri, I can see one question directed towards you by Mr. Bikash Kumar. Does government provide any incentive for high animal welfare, poultry or cattle farming?
I think this is there are compensations for the diseases. Like if avian influenza strikes the poultry farm, yes, there are compensation. And if similarly we have seen in the equines also, if there are glanders, we have come up with that some compensation. And for avian influenza, and there have been some initiatives taken by the government of India, where they are thinking of providing compensation to the poultry farmers or to the livestock farmers, where they lose a major, because in case of the African swine fever also compensation was we said that compensation should be provided to the farmers.
Okay.
But I would also emphasize one more point, that yes, there are, because what is being projected for the animal sector, we need to have collaboration, because environmental sector, what they are doing and how we correlate the transmission of the genes from environment to one sector to another sector, so that we can get a full picture regarding the this presence of the antimicrobial resistant genes and how they are being transferred. So that is very important. This is a researchable area. And we have also seen that some of the antimicrobials which have not been used in the poultry or animal science sector, we are getting resistance against those. That means they are being spread through environment. And there was one question also, sir, that I would like to give in one line, that whether I don't know, remember her name, but she had said that whether we can, are you getting any sampling you have done with the, because animals are staying with humans also, and yes, we collected some from the human handlers, but we so far we have not detected any antimicrobial resistance in the human side.
Okay, all right, thanks for that response. I see from Helen Lambert, the graph on antibiotics in surface water bodies is very interesting. And she goes, what is the source of the data, and what should the government of India be doing to regulate or otherwise address this issue? Both to Dr. Misri and Dr. Gupta.
I would say not to get panic of these isolated reports, but this is just to give you an idea that these type of studies are needed. And these reports are, I said, these are 1 or 2 studies from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. You can Google it, Pandian et al. And the other is from Center for Science. They have published some work. And the other study was from Chennai. There is the Environment Department of Environment. They published one report, but they lack methodological rigor. When I say so, the number of samples from the downstream, and that how many kilometers and what place of the stream it was collected. So these are these few issues which are important, and these are not so easy questions. because you have to link it with the possible sewage, with the possible source of these antibiotics, whether they are coming from the effluent from the hospital, whether they are coming from the, see, there are lots of possibilities which have been expressed in the waste of antibiotics, leftover antibiotics from home, they just go waste like that. There is no disposal policy from the hospital, and including the industry, which is, are they properly disposing of the water effluent? Though on paper they are, but we have to really work very strongly what could be the possible things. And then lastly, is that important for resistance? Theoretically, yes. So these are the important questions, and that's why we have to work on this area.
Right. Thank you.
Can I add one point that there is, for this, what Dr. Gupta was suggesting, continued and systematic surveillance is very much required, because we cannot think of isolated reports we are collecting from surface water here, there. What we are getting in other places and how we will correlate these findings. So like Pollution Control Board, Water and Sanitation Department, all their collaboration and is required for this integrated surveillance studies, so that we could identify and we could target those samples as per the sampling frame, and we have uniformity of results for correlation, tabulation and evaluation of those results. That is very important. And because I think in wildlife sector, where it is the reservoir, so all those sectors, even agriculture sector, there are not many antimicrobials which are being used for human use, are being used for agriculture sector also. So there are many areas which are not touched even. So we need to work on those, and that is only possible to One Health collaboration from various agencies and integrated evaluation and of the tabulated data from all the sectors. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with what you said, madam. And that's what I said, that these are the points which can be flagged, but this should be worked upon. Not that they have the data. That data is required to be generated.
All right. So in the best interest of time, I will just draw your attention to one of the questions that pops up, and the organizers can get back to Godfrey McCook, who is mentioning that I have witnessed a trend of common commercial chicken bacterial pathogens, E. coli and Salmonella, being resistant to virtually all antibiotics on the market except gentamicin. And is this a real threat to chicken production, and what is the danger to humans? If such resistant genes can be transmitted to humans through consumption of chicken, meat and eggs. So that's a question for us to ponder upon and get back to the discussants. I will hand over to Professor Rajiv Dasgupta for poll 3 and closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Panda. Thank you very much, Dr. Mistry and Dr. Gupta. We will quickly have poll 3 on your screens. Take a couple of minutes and then we will close down at 4:30. Poll 3 is now on your screens. Thank you. Please complete your polling. And once again, thanks very much to the participants, those who couldn't attend but registered, and we shall keep in touch with them. This will be available on the YouTube. Thanks very much to the organizing team at JNU, Pallavi Mishra, Shweta Sharma at the UK RVC end, Rhiannon Prescott, the Chatham House led by Robin Alders and Doreen. Thank you, everyone. And once again, we express our sincere gratitude and thanks to Dr. Mistry and Dr. Gupta. So on behalf of the One Health Poultry Hub, we will sign off, and we shall share with you the announcement of webinar 2, which will be in the 3rd week of January, and we look forward to meeting you again. Thank you. We'll close this and wishing everyone a happy new year ahead. Thank you.